The anime tells the story of a loner named Yusuke Yotsuya. He is a high school student who lives a normal boring life every day. But one day, when Yotsuya's teacher reprimanded him for still not submitting a career questionnaire, Yotsuya saw two of his classmates, Shindo and Kusue Hakozaki, conversing after school, and he felt something strange about them. Sure enough, as soon as the teacher left the classroom, they disappeared from the classroom. The situation became even more strange after Yotsuya heard the sound of a kid running outside the classroom, and the blackboard in the classroom suddenly filled with strange pictures. Then, Yotsuya's body began to glow and was mysteriously transported to another world. It turned out that Yotsuya wasn't the only one who was thrown into that world because a few moments later, he found Shindo and Hakozaki there. And somehow, Shindo knew that soon a half-faced person would appear. It's true what she said. The half-faced creature called the Game Master suddenly appeared, making Yotsuya surprised to see its hideous head. As if not wanting to waste time, the Game Master immediately gave instructions to Yotsuya to complete the quests with Hakozaki and Shindo. And their first mission is to fulfill the request of a village chief within 14 days. But the process of completing the mission will not be easy because the world is full of monsters ready to kill them. After the Game Master finished explaining, Shindo and Hakozaki changed as if they were characters from a fantasy world. Shindo turned into a wind mage, while Hakozaki turned into a warrior. Then, since Yotsuya still doesn't have a job, the Game Master spins the roulette to determine the job for him. Unfortunately, he only got the role of a farmer. After that, the Game Master immediately left the three of them, and Yotsuya instantly turned into a level 1 farmer. Wondering what really happened, Yotsuya then asked Shindo, who luckily was willing to explain. She was the first among the three of them to be summoned by the Game Master to another world. Then, after she successfully completes the task, the Game Master returns her to real life and tells her to befriend Hakozaki. Shindo did as the Game Master ordered, and a few days later, she was transported back to another world. And surprisingly, the Game Master summoned Hakozaki with her. Hearing Shindo's story, Yotsuya finally realized that he wasn't dreaming. Thus, he decided to go on a mission with Shindo and Hakozaki. They walked through the forest until they found a strange sign that gave off a green light a few moments later. According to Shindo, it was a log point capable of storing events that happened in the past. Curious, Yotsuya then touched the log point, and a scene appeared when Hakozaki had just arrived in that world. Yotsuya had not had time to digest what he saw because the goblins were already around, ready to attack them. Confidently, Yotsuya pulled out his weapon, a sickle, and dashed towards the goblins. But when he swung the sickle to attack them, the sickle was immediately broken, sending him into a panic. Because of that, Yotsuya enlisted the help of Shindo and Hakozaki, a mage and knight who were more experienced than him. But it turned out that Shindo's level was still low, so she could only let out a weak wind that felt like the wind from a fan. Hakozaki is just as bad as Shindo. She was so frightened that she threw her sword at the goblin. Seeing Hakozaki's sword lying, Yotsuya intended to use it against the goblins. But he couldn't even touch the sword because apparently, the weapons in that world could only be used by their true owners. But Yotsuya still didn't give up. He still has another weapon, namely a hoe, and uses it to attack the enemy. But again, the hoe broke as soon as he swung it. As a result, the goblins attacked him, killing him instantly. Because Yotsuya died, his spirit is now separated from his body. It surprised him even more when he saw the goblins kill Hakozaki. But miraculously, a few seconds later, Yotsuya's spirit returned to his body. In other words, he was revived. According to Shindo, the players in that world would automatically come back to life 30 seconds after their death. Hearing that, Yotsuya then thought there must be a way to win if he could come back to life. So he started to devise a strategy. Before then, he told Shindo to make dust with her wind magic. The dust eventually blocked the goblins' view, allowing Yotsuya to stab and kill them. Finally, they won the fight, though Yotsuya had to die again. But apart from the victory, there's one thing that is still bugging Yotsuya's mind. What happens if all three of them die? Here, Shindo answered with a serious look on her face. If all three of them died, she said, they would truly die without a chance to be revived. Yotsuya, Shindo, and Hakozaki decided to rest on the rocks at night. This was when Yotsuya checked the status of his 2 damaged weapons, which would only regenerate after 5 days. Then he wondered what the reward would be if they successfully completed the mission. Here again, Shindo knew the answer to Yotsuya's question. According to her, the Game Master will answer one question from them, only that. After hearing Shindo's answer, Yotsuya immediately left with the excuse that he would keep an eye on the surroundings. But in truth, he slaughtered the goblins in the forest, and managed to raise his level. But then, suddenly, Shindo's scream was heard from the direction of the camp. And Yotsuya quickly ran over to check what was going on. It turned out that a troll had attacked the camp. Hakozaki had been seriously injured, while Shindo was eaten by the troll. In a panic, Yotsuya chose to run away with Hakozaki because, after all, everything would end if he died. He didn't want to take the risk. The next day, Yotsuya and Hakozaki reach a lake when he notices her hand is not regenerating. Hakozaki wasn't sure why this had happened and could only guess it was because a troll had eaten her hand. Hearing that, Yotsuya thought that even Shindo might not be revived because she was eaten by trolls, and so he decided to complete the mission without her. Moments later, Yotsuya and Hakozaki arrived at their destination village, where the residents greeted them and called them heroes. Although confused by the behavior of the residents, they decided to meet the village chief, who then explained to them about the appearance of trolls around the village. Therefore, he asked Yotsuya and Hakozaki for help to defeat the troll and save the village. No doubt, the request of the village chief immediately made Yotsuya gloomy. In the end, Yotsuya had to deal with the troll, but he decided not to run anymore. He realized that he wouldn't be able to beat the troll at his current level, so he had to level up first. With that, he left the village while telling Hakozaki to stay. A few moments passed, and now Yotsuya was seen fighting with the goblins in the forest. But unfortunately, even though he dominated the battle, one of the goblins managed to escape, thus making him only reach level 9. To be able to change his job, he had to reach level 10. But now, he was tired and needed rest. Yotsuya had just made up his mind. Suddenly a notification popped up telling him that Hakozaki had died. He then rushed back to the village, which turned out to have been destroyed while he was gone. Fortunately, there was a log point in the village, and without further ado, Yotsuya touched it. However, Yotsuya was surprised when the log point showed him the scene where Hakozaki was training hard with the sword in the company of a boy. While practicing, she told the boy about herself. In real life, it turns out that Hakozaki can't do excessive sports because she suffers from an illness. So, she lacks stamina. Unlike in this world, she felt healthy and could move as she pleased. Therefore, she is determined to train hard to help her team. After Hakozaki finished speaking, that's when the troll came to attack the village and ate her. The view presented by Log Point seemed to make Yotsuya realize that he had only been thinking about himself all this time. But before he could move far to find the troll appeared in front of him, attacking him until he was thrown far away. Luckily, he wasn't hurt. He was able to bounce back immediately after landing in the water, and then he ran into the forest, where he found a goblin. Without further ado, he killed the goblin and made it to level 10. At this moment, time suddenly stopped before the game master finally appeared before Yotsuya. He then congratulated Yotsuya and rotated the job roulette to determine a new job class for him. This time Yotsuya's luck improved slightly. He got a job as a chef. With his new ability and weapon, a knife, Yotsuya can slit open the troll's stomach, thus bringing Shindo and Hakozaki back to life. But that doesn't mean the troll has lost. Therefore, Yotsuya devised a strategy to kill the troll and immediately told Shindo about his plan. The plan was really reckless because Yotsuya had to enter the troll's stomach through the wound he had just made to attack it from the inside. After that, Shindo had to climb on the troll's head and use her wind magic to finish it off. Although risky, the plan was successful, and they finally defeated the monster. It didn't take long for the game master to reappear. He congratulated them on completing the mission before allowing Yotsuya to ask a question. Hearing that, Yotsuya was reminded of Shindo and Hakozaki's question before entering this world. Shindo once asked why Game Master chose her to come to another world. But as it turned out, it wasn't the Game Master who chose her, but someone she knew. As for Hakozaki, she asked who the Game Master really was, to which he replied that he was from the future. After a moment of thought, Yotsuya finally asked what would happen after they successfully completed all the missions. Game Master then shows them a glimpse of the future world to answer the question. In the picture, Yotsuya and the other players seem to be fighting against the monsters that attack their city. But before Yotsuya could contemplate the shadow, the Game Master returned him and the others to their original world. Miraculously, time in real life didn't move at all while they were in another world. Some time had passed since their return, and now Yotsuya was running down the streets of Tokyo. He was reminded of the visual that Game Master showed. Even though it was only a glimpse, he was sure that the city in the visual was the city where he lived. That meant, in the future, Yotsuya and the other players would fight to protect the city. A moment later, Yotsuya's cell phone suddenly rang. Turns out it was the Game Master who contacted him. He gives Yotsuya another mission to visit the second floor of an unfamiliar school. His mission this time is to save a girl named Yuka from the students who bullied her. Yotsuya has no choice but to save her, because if he failed, it would only make the risk of his death on the next quest increase drastically. At least that's what he thought. Therefore, Yotsuya destroyed all of the bullies' phones, making them run away in fright. Yotsuya, Shindo, and Hakozaki are transported back to another world 2 weeks later. They were surprised to see Yuka was summoned because she was chosen as the fourth member of the party. And she seems to be luckier than Yotsuya because when the game master spins the roulette, she gets a job as a fire mage. Along with that, Game Master explains a new rule in the game. From now on, if they die, they must wait for 40 seconds before they come back to life. The purpose of adding 10 seconds is nothing but to increase difficulty. As for their mission this time, they had to deliver goods to a village called Redorpo and explore 5% of the map, and they have to do that within 40 days. As usual, after explaining the mission, the Game Master left immediately. After encountering centipede monsters on their way and leveling up, Yotsuya and friends arrive at the village they once saved. But the village was ravaged and abandoned, with not a single resident left. At this time, a merchant happened to pass near the village, and he recognized the Yotsuya team, which he called the heroes. Through the merchant, they finally learned that the village had been abandoned for the past 5 years, indicating that the flow of time in this world was different from theirs. Since there was nothing they could do about the village, Yotsuya asked the merchant about Redorpo. The merchant took out his map and showed that Redorpo was located almost at the western end of the continent. It would take a long time to get there on foot, for they were now far to the east. Therefore, Shindo begged the merchant to lend them his horse. But he refused because he needed it to carry his wares. Instead, the merchant told them about a martial arts tournament in Cordonal. The winner of the tournament will receive a prize of 3 horses. Hearing that, Yotsuya and the others immediately decided to go to Cordonal for the tournament. However, on their way to Cordonal, Yotsuya and others are confronted by bandits. Yotsuya immediately pulled out his knife, ready to fight against the bandits. But before he launched his attack, a notification from the Game Master appeared, informing him that his level would drop if he attacked a fellow human. Not wanting to drop their level, Yotsuya and the others couldn't help but choose to run away. They ran until they finally noticed that Shindo had disappeared, making Yuka suspect that the bandits had caught her. Unexpectedly, Yotsuya asked Yuka and Hakozaki to continue the journey because he felt that the safety of the players had nothing to do with the mission. After all, Shindo can still survive if only one of them successfully completes the mission. However, Hakozaki and Yuka disagree with Yotsuya, causing them to separate. Hakozaki and Yuka will save Shindo, while Yotsuya will still participate in the tournament in Cordonal. The 2 girls then went to the bandit headquarters, and it didn't take long before they were finally caught and put in a cage with Shindo. On the other hand, Yotsuya managed to defeat the goblins along his journey, thus making him level up and get a new job, namely the Organism Wizard, which allows him to speed up or slow down the metabolism of living things just by touching them. Some time passed, and finally, Yotsuya reached Cordonal. Wasting no time, he entered a tournament, where he had to face off against a knight named Kaval. Yotsuya bravely charged forward to attack the knight, but the knight could repel his attacks easily and even kill him. But it didn't matter because, after 40 seconds, Yotsuya came back to life and immediately got up. This miracle no doubt amazed Kaval, even though she could have guessed it based on rumors about heroes. Yotsuya admitted his defeat to Kaval, and therefore, now that it was no longer possible for him to obtain the prize of horses, he asked her to lend him a horse. Unexpectedly, Kaval is willing to fulfill the wish as long as Yotsuya is willing to help her defeat big monsters, such as trolls. Hearing these conditions, Yotsuya immediately remembered something. Instead of monsters, he proposed to Kaval that they defeat the bandits who kidnapped his friend, Shindo. Kaval agreed with Yotsuya's suggestion, and she gathered troops in Cordonal City and led them towards the bandits' headquarters. Cordonal's troops proved formidable. They managed to corner the bandits, to the point that they had to take out their trump card, a large man nicknamed the Berserker. At this moment, Kaval, who really liked to cut the flesh of living creatures, rushed forward against the Berserkers. They then fought for a while until Kaval's stamina was drained. Realizing that Kaval's life was in danger, Yotsuya took action. He blocked the Berserker's attack and then distracted the Berserker, catching him off guard. Kaval certainly didn't waste that opportunity. She charged forward and killed the Berserker with a slash of her sword. After the bandits were overcome, Yotsuya immediately rescued his team members. But while they were enjoying their reunion moment, Kaval came interrupting, saying that Kaval and some of her bodyguards would be taking a sabbatical from their work to accompany Yotsuya's party to Redorpo. That way, the journey of Yotsuya and his friends will be faster because Kaval has horses. Even so, Kaval had conditions they had to fulfill. First, Yotsuya and his team had to return Kaval's horses once they arrived at Redorpo. And second, they had to allow her to train them in the sword during the journey. Yotsuya and the others agreed to Kaval's terms, and they continued their journey. And according to her promise, Kaval several times trained Yotsuya and the 3 girls in swordsmanship. The party arrived at a forest infested with goblins a few days later. Yotsuya and his team confirmed that they would take care of the goblins because ever since they left the bandits' base, they had only been busy training without raising their level. They started slaughtering the goblins, and unexpectedly, Hakozaki jumped into action. She finally managed to get her courage and kill a goblin, though she later felt guilty and even apologized to the goblin she killed. The next day, the group finds people being attacked by kobolds. Yotsuya guessed that the people might be carrying goods to Ridorpo, so he split his team into two. Yotsuya and Hakozaki would save the people, while Shindo and Yuka continued their journey with Kaval. But Yotsuya and Hakozaki had a hard time fighting these monsters. In the end, Kaval and the others decided to go back and help them. Their decision proved right. Kaval could defeat the kobolds with ease. The group Yotsuya and friends rescued turned out to be soldiers from the Diak kingdom carrying heretics to Ridorpo, where they would later be executed. According to Camilto, the commander of Diak's troop of soldiers, these heretics are worshippers of the god Arteros, forbidden in the Diak kingdom. Therefore, by order of the king, they had to be executed in public. Kaval immediately became angry upon hearing what Camilto had said. She thinks Diak is a dictatorial kingdom that intends to rule over the entire continent, and its king even has the heart to execute its own inhabitants in another country. Kaval's humiliation of the king of Diak certainly made Camilto just as angry. Disputes were inevitable as Camilto and Kaval brandished their respective weapons, ready to kill each other. Fortunately, Shindo intervened, so they lowered their weapons again. During the tense situation, Yotsuya gathered all his teammates for a discussion. He surmised that the items the game master referred to, which they had to deliver to Ridorpo, were none other than the heretic prisoners. But on the other hand, Yotsuya had suspicions that the game master was testing them. He wanted to see if Yotsuya and his team would sacrifice human lives to complete their mission. The four of them were unable to decide exactly what they should do. So, for the time being, they will accompany the soldiers of the Diak kingdom to bring the prisoners to Ridorpo. 2 days later, the group arrived in a mountainous area. At this moment, Camilto suddenly informed them of the shortcut to Ridorpo. And that shortcut is a cave under the mountains. But it's all just a trap. Camilto reasoned that he had to activate the cave mechanism so they could get out from the other end. And because of that, he asked Yotsuya and the others to first enter the cave. They innocently followed Camilto's instructions, only to find themselves trapped inside. Camilto had activated the cave's security system, closing the exit behind them. Yotsuya was starting to get worried because he wasn't sure they could get out of the cave, and now they had lost the captives, which were probably the things they had to bring to Ridorpo. Even so, Kaval remained persistent. She advised them to find a way out of the cave as soon as possible so she could kill the traitors. So, they went deeper into the cave. But unfortunately, the cave was filled with traps, one of which made Yotsuya fall into a hole and separated him from the group. The wall at the bottom of the hole did not allow him to climb up, so he asked the others to go first. Shindo and the others were forced to continue without Yotsuya. They continued walking down the cave until Hakozaki suddenly asked for a pen and paper to analyze the traps in the cave. And after doing some calculations, she was finally able to understand how the traps worked, allowing them to continue searching for their way out safely. Fortunately, Yotsuya was able to find a way to get out of the hole by making a foothold with his knife. After a while, Shindo's group finally managed to find the cave's exit gate, which, once they opened it, revealed the battle arena behind it. And the opponent they had to face was a monster called a gargoyle. As if that wasn't enough, soon the vampire bats appeared, breaking their concentration. Kaval stepped forward to face the gargoyle with a smile on her face while the others were busy taking care of the bats. But the gargoyle was too tough for her. After clashing swords for a while, it stabbed Kaval, sending her falling into the water. After dealing with Kaval, the gargoyle turned the attention to the frightened Shindo. She was so scared that she slowly backed away and accidentally stepped on a bat to death. She was just a little away from reaching level 10, and that one bat was enough to level her up. In an instant, time stopped. The game master reappears to spin the roulette and gives Shindo a new job, which is a knight. Shindo then attacked the gargoyle with her new sword. But unfortunately, her sword couldn't cut the monster's hard skin. In contrast, the gargoyle could throw her far with just one attack. At this point, Shindo remembered Kaval's teachings when she taught her the swordsmanship, which was to stab the enemy's heart directly from above. That way, her sword won't be blocked by the ribs. Shindo felt that the attack technique was worth trying, and with that, she charged forward to practice it. Her efforts ended in great success. She manages to stab the gargoyle's heart and kill it, though she loses her right arm during the battle. A few moments later, Yotsuya finally arrived at the battle arena, where he saw Shindo smiling triumphantly and one of Kaval's men screaming for him to quickly save his master. When Kaval woke up, she was already in the carriage, with the wound in her stomach already healed. Her bodyguard, Makwa, tells her that Yotsuya healed the wound using monster blood, though it drained his mana. After saying that, Makwa got out of the carriage, leaving his master alone with Yotsuya, who was still unconscious. At this moment, Kaval suddenly kissed Yotsuya. Shindo and the others, which accidentally were about to check on Kaval's condition, were immediately taken aback when they saw what Kaval did. Out of curiosity, Shindo then asked Kaval why she did that. But Kaval simply replied that she got the urge to just do it. There is no other reason. In the afternoon, Yotsuya finally woke up, and he immediately discussed with his team members their mission. Based on Yotsuya's proposal, they decided to split up into two groups. Team A, consisting of Hakozaki, Shindo, and Makwa, will find a way to complete their quest. Meanwhile, Yotsuya, Yuka, and Kaval will after the Diak soldiers. After that, Team A immediately set out to look for moving items to Ridorpo, while Team B devised a plan to confront Diak soldiers. They had to be careful because if they were to directly fight with the soldiers, it could trigger a war between the Diak kingdom and Cordonal. After thinking for some time, Yotsuya finally found a strategy. The next afternoon, Kaval, Yuka, and Yotsuya had caught up with Kamilto and his men, but they didn't act right away. Instead, they chose to watch the group while waiting for a good opportunity. And the opportunity came at night. At this time, Yuka visits Diak soldiers' camp, claiming that she actually doesn't get along with Yotsuya, who has converted to the Arteros religion. She was even willing to lead them to Yotsuya's camp location so they could capture him. Kamilto had some doubts about Yuka's statement, but he decided to follow her because, after all, he felt they could catch her easily if she was proven to be lying. With that, Kamilto ordered his men to guard the prisoners, while he went to follow Yuka with only one subordinate. But after a few minutes of walking in the dark, Kamilto's man stabbed Yuka in the back before checking the location she indicated. But there, Kamito's men didn't find Yotsuya or anyone, so he returned to Kamilto and reported that Yuka had lied. With that, they returned to the carriage with the revived Yuka. Kamilto and his men did not realize that they had fallen into a trap. Yotsuya sneakily sneaked into their camp and beat the guard soldiers unconscious as they left. Then, he asked the captives to take off their clothes and put them on Kamilto's men. After that, he told them to hide in a cave not far from there. So when Kamilto returned to camp, Yotsuya pointed at Kamilto's men lying unconscious, claiming he had incapacitated the captives. After that, Yotsuya killed the soldiers by burning them alive, making Kamilto panic because he thought it was his captives who were on fire. During the chaos, Yotsuya and Yuka took advantage of the situation to escape from the scene. Riding Kamilto's horse, they then headed for the cave where the prisoners were waiting. Kamilto felt sad and upset after failing to carry out the mission his king had given him. He still gave a report about his failure to the king, with a letter sent using the bird he brought. But just as the bird had departed, Kamilto was surprised by the sudden appearance of Kaval, who told him to pick up his weapon. And with that, they had a one-on-one duel. The duel was fast, with Kaval coming out victorious. The next day, Yotsuya, Yuka, and Kaval continued their journey towards Ridorpo with the prisoners they had saved. They brought boxes containing the decapitated heads of Diak soldiers because, based on Yotsuya's guess, those heads were the items they had to take to Ridorpo to complete the Game Master's mission. Elsewhere, Team A managed to find someone carrying cargo to Ridorpo, and Shindo then offered to escort him. They didn't know that the courier already had a bodyguard, who immediately got out of the cart and hostile towards them, whether Shindo and the others were heroes. The bodyguard didn't want any business rivals to interfere with his work, so he drew his sword and attacked Shindo. But she was able to beat him without breaking a sweat. And so, he couldn't help but agree to cooperate with Shindo and the others to escort the courier. Shindo and Hakozaki still weren't sure that what they were doing was enough to complete the mission. But suddenly, a notification from the Game Master appeared, telling them that they had completed the mission to deliver goods to Ridorpo. Obviously, they were confused by the notification. It turned out that the notification appeared because Team B had arrived at Ridorpo and handed over boxes of heads to the authorities there. They reported the plans and atrocities of the Diak kingdom to the devotees of Arteros. As evidence, they asked the Ridorpo authorities to meet the victims they brought into town. The Ridorpo authorities appreciate Kaval and the others for stopping the heinous plot of the Diak kingdom. However, they suggested that Kaval didn't bring the severed head the next time, even if it was evidence. After that, Yotsuya, Yuka, and Kaval reunited with Team A who had just arrived in Ridorpo. Without wasting any time, they immediately discussed the one remaining mission to explore 5% of the map area. They only had a day and a half left, so they split up in 4 different directions. They parted ways with Kaval, who was clearly sad to see Yotsuya leave. She had fallen in love with him, but she couldn't and didn't want to stop him. She could only hope that Yotsuya would be fine. However, things did not go well for Yotsuya and his teams. Their exploration was hampered by a sudden blizzard, making their progress very slow. They only have 6 hours left, but they still have 10 kilometers to explore. It made Yotsuya doubt whether they could complete the mission. The situation worsened because then he fell into a dungeon. But fortunately, Yotsuya still hasn't given up. He decided to explore the dungeon to complete the mission. But just as his spirit returned, suddenly, a notification came informing him that Hakozaki had died. And worse, her current situation does not allow her to be revived. Meanwhile, Shindo briefly lost consciousness before she finally regained it after the notification of Hakozaki's death appeared. Shindo kept moving forward until she saw lights in the distance, indicating that there were settlements in that direction. That means she can borrow a horse from the residents. Excitedly, she moved towards the lights, unaware that she had run over the frozen lake. Ironically, as Shindo got close to the source of the lights, the ice on her feet shattered, sending her sinking into the cold water. Shortly after, she died. And she couldn't possibly come back to life because even if she were to be resurrected, she would soon die by drowning. The only way for Shindo and Hakozaki to come back to life is if Yotsuya or Yuka completes the mission. Notification of Shindo's death reached Yotsuya, who was immediately disappointed that he relied on her to complete the mission. But he realized he couldn't be sad forever, he had to keep going. And that's what he did. He kept walking down the dungeon until he finally hit a dead end. But at this moment, Yotsuya saw a giant worm digging in the ground, and he decided to follow the worm from behind, hoping to find a way out of the dungeon if he did. But when he was following the giant worm, he suddenly heard a sound from behind him. And when he checked it, it turned out that the sound came from a monster ready to eat him. Yotsuya is dead. Now, only Yuka was left alive. But unfortunately, Yuka was ready to give up once she learned of Yotsuya's death. With all of her comrades dead, she felt there was no way she could complete the mission alone. And so, she stopped in her tracks, waiting for her death to come. But suddenly, Yuka's imagination starts to work. She begins to have illusions about the anime characters she has liked since childhood, namely the Mijiha sisters, which appear in front of her. The fictional characters then cheer on Yuka, reminding her of their struggle against evil. They never and will never give up, and Yuka should act like them. After remembering all the anime episodes she watched, Yuka got back up with a restored spirit. And then she used her fire magic to warm her body before starting to walk again. Although, not long after, Yuka seemed to have reached her limit. But fortunately, at this time, a magician named Fatina appeared while riding a giant cat. She then offered Yuka a ride, and an exhausted Yuka accepted it without a second thought. But even so, she still had to complete the mission, and she started crying because she only had about 3 minutes left. Realizing Yuka was crying, Fatina asked her what was going on, and as soon as she found out about the problem, she immediately summoned a wind spirit to increase their speed. And in the end, Yuka managed to complete the mission a few seconds before the deadline ended. After that, the game master summons Yuka and revives Yotsuya, Shindo, and Hakozaki. As a reward for her success, Game Master invited Yuka to ask him a question. At first, Yuka wanted to know Fatina's identity, but then she thought the witch's appearance must have been arranged by the Game Master to help them at the last moment. Not wanting to waste a precious question on something ridiculous, she finally chose to ask the Game Master a question that had been on her mind all along. Is this other world just a virtual one? But to their surprise, Game Master explains that it is a parallel world. To be more precise, it was an alternate Earth that branched off from the timeline of the original Earth. So, in other words, all the creatures that exist there are real and animate. Upon hearing that the people he met were Earthlings in a parallel world, Yotsuya immediately trembled, realizing that he had killed real humans. Before he could speak to the Game Master, Yotsuya and the others were returned to their world. Yotsuya kept thinking about the people he had killed, to the point that his guilt made him unable to sleep. And the next day, when Yotsuya went to school, he had a hard time living his life. The thought of his murder victims kept haunting his mind. As if aware of Yotsuya's emotional state, the Game Master sent him a message when he came home from school. The message contains a simple question: how do you feel after killing people? But Yotsuya didn't reply to the message. He's too shocked. Offended that the message was not answered, the Game Master then came straight to Yotsuya, in the form of a little girl, and again asked the same question: how do you feel after killing people, Yotsuya? In response, Yotsuya replied that he felt guilty. But if he had known the truth beforehand, he would not have killed the people of that world. Without seeming to really heed Yotsuya's answer, the Game Master invited Yotsuya to meet the next player who would be part of his party. And they went to a restaurant, where a man was sitting at the front table. According to the Game Master, the man was a drug dealer, and within 20 seconds, the fifth player, Keita, would appear and kill him. That is precisely what the Game Master said. After 20 seconds had passed, 3 masked men came to the restaurant to kill the drug dealer. Yotsuya tried to stop them by tripping one of them. Obviously, that made them get into a fight until Yotsuya accidentally took off Keita's mask. But then, a man who is the mastermind behind the drug dealer's assassination plot appears. Thinking that Yotsuya was the drug dealer's accomplice, the man then pointed his gun at Yotsuya, wanting to kill him. Fortunately, the Game Master helped Yotsuya. He gave him a glove, an item belonging to Yotsuya in another world. Wearing that one glove, he managed to defeat the gunman. After that, the Game Master invited Yotsuya to talk on the roof of a building. There, Yotsuya admits that he is just a kid and nobody. He was determined to fight for the truth he believed in, until now and from now on. And the first season of I'm Standing on a Million Lives ended. Although this anime is still not completely finished, we can already take some lessons from it. The moral that can be learned from this anime is, don't make assumptions about something dangerous or sensitive, especially when it relates to someone's life.